Welcome, 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 welcome to the
To the
rum.
rum.
To the rum. This is Brian,
This is Constantine,
and
and we
together we
are
are the
the rum.
rum. We are one with the rum, but our bodies are mostly, you say you're like 30% water. You might be more than that. I think you're more than that. But of that percentage, we're at least half rum at this point,
And if you
Constantine.
go to the doctor's going to say, sounds like someone's got a case of the rumsies.
Rumsey. Oh, yeah, I know. And then we need to do a remake of I Told the Witch Doctor I Drank a Lot of Rum. All right. All right. So, anyways, guys, really appreciate everybody who has tuned in and listened. Constantine, we have 1,016 listens. We have
Hmm.
150 subscribers on all the platforms. And where can people subscribe to us?
Anywhere you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Amazon Music, and I don't know what else is out there for podcast. I'm sure there's some obscure app that I don't know about, but wherever you get them, we're there. And we're in the
Uh,
top 10%, we just found out, of
Woo.
podcasts globally, which is
Well, it's
nuts.
Constantine that you have a very silky smooth voice, and with your silky smooth voice and my very obscure movie quotes, and our guests just going, "What the hell did we get ourselves into?"
It's
I
the
think
voice
it's
is
a
filtered through the
the
mustache. I don't know if you can
mustache,
see this or
a
you can feel
mustache,
it.
a mustache. I can't grow one quite like that. I have to let this go for like 3 weeks, and then I can start shaping this. Otherwise, it just looks really weird. Cool, guys. Quick updates from my end. Let's see what's going on in the world of the Rum Champion. Two Rum Curious Club events with Plant Array. So this coming weekend, the 3rd and the 4th, we've got Oldfields and Tonga Hut. We have our first Rum Curious tasting events where this is really going to be at liquor stores, and that's going to be in the middle of this month, the 17th and the 18th, both of which Privateer is sponsoring, by the way. So come hang out with me, drink some rum. We'll be in San Diego on the 17th at Chips Liquor, Pacific Beach. Shout out Chips. And the 18th will be up in Pasadena at Showcase Wine and Spirits. Apart from those lovely events, Constantine, I'm actually being sent to Guyana by El Dorado for a few
Being
days next
sent
month.
to.
Being sent to. I know it's such a rough life. And thank you for everybody who has joined our Facebook group. The Rum Curious Club finally started a Facebook group, and we have 223 members that joined within a week. And we want to get that growing and growing and growing and sharing all the cool things that we're doing there. And you can actually be involved in the conversation.
Yeah, well, down here in Fiji, the distillery is still moving forward. Can't say too much about that now, but is moving forward and will likely go into production later this year. There also
Ooh.
might be a new rum bar in Fiji, which will be the second rum bar that I know of. The first one sadly did not survive COVID. You'd think there'd be a lot of rum bars in Fiji, but there's just not. There's people think there's a lot of distilleries in Fiji. There's not. There's one. So and about to be two. Looking ahead beyond that into next year. Fiji Rum and Tiki Fest 2025 is happening. We don't have dates yet, but we will get that out to you. Look at our social media. We're going to be putting out some asking for expressions of interest on that. Planning will be starting in February. So look for updates on that. To the Rum social media, we're out there. We're on Instagram, Facebook. What else are we on?
We have a YouTube channel. We
YouTube.
have done very little so far, but it's coming.
It's coming. It's all coming. In my alter ego as the rum runner up to the rum champion, I've now got my Instagram up. So look for that rum runner up on Instagram. Lots of crazy things that are going to be happening there in the coming months. Who do we have today, Brian, on our show?
Ooh, well, so we are honored and humbled to have Kit Carruthers and Andrew Cabot. So if you don't know Kit, Dr. Kit Carruthers is the owner and distiller at Ninefold Distillery in Scotland. So it's been since 2018, launched in 2019, and it's one of the first modern Scottish rum distilleries to make their own rum from scratch. And we're going to hear way more from Kit on that, but Doctor, I think I have to call you Doctor now. I can't call you Kit. So, Doctor, thank you for joining us.
You
Doctor,
totally have to call me doctor through the entire podcast. You cannot
Doctor,
call me by my first name. It must be the doctor at all
done,
times.
done. Appreciate you, Doctor. And next we have the one and only Andrew Cabot. Now, if you are unfamiliar with Andrew Cabot, he is the owner of Privateer Rum up in Ipswich, Massachusetts. Constantine, say Ipswich 5 times fast as you can. Ipswich,
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 Ipswich.
Ipswich, Ipswich,
Oh, we
sandwich.
got, yeah. Sandwich. And Privateer's been around for 15 years. And if you don't know the history, Andrew's going to get into it, but they have direct ties to the American Revolution where the ancestor, Andrew Cabot, making great rum, ties to the revolution, and we're honored to have both of them on. So, Andrew, I'm going to shut up. Thanks for joining.
Happy to be here, guys. Looking forward.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We usually do show and tell, but it's early morning for you, Constantine. It's 11 a.m. for me,
Oh,
so I don't know if Andrew, you're enjoying something. Oh God, I guess I better pour something then real quick.
I'm gonna get something. Hang on.
All right.
a
Ooh, Kit, what
daiquiri
have you
there in
got? Oh, a
Scotland.
daiquiri. There you go.
Yeah, got a daiquiri here. Obviously
Beautiful.
made its own rum.
Ooh.
But yeah, it's like 7 o'clock, half seven in the evening, so why not?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
it's Miller time. Awesome.
It's Miller time. Well, Constantine, so that's who we have on. And you know what? I'm just pouring a tiny little tipple, Kit, or excuse me, Doctor. I told you before the show, I only have
Doctor?
a tiny little bit of Ninefold left, and I'm savoring that. So I'm going to start with Maiden Voyage, which was the Rum Curious Club's first ever barrel pick. So I'm going to have a little bit of that. And you know what, Doctor? I think I will probably have to finish the Ninefold with you on the call because first time I tasted Ninefold, I got it from the Whiskey Exchange, and my eyeballs nearly bulged out of their head because it was that amazing. So, anyways, everybody, Andrew, what privateer rum are you drinking?
It's a Monday, so I'm tasting last week's distillate.
Nice.
There you go. On a Monday.
You
Cool.
guys
Well,
ever
Constant.
worry that your insurance rates for health are going to go up because you're seen drinking all the time? I'm just waiting for a call from Blue Cross Blue Shield to say your lifestyle is outside of our norms. You're entering our actuarial tables.
Ooh, you
That
know,
would surprise me.
it would not surprise me. Your premium's
Yeah.
going up 600% because all you post about is rum. Well,
Not something we have to worry about in Scotland, but that's a whole other debate, right?
oh no, yeah. Appreciate you both being on. And guys, to set the stage for today, when you think about rum, the vast majority of the average consumer thinks, oh, it's a spiced rum or it's a flavored,
Mm.
lime flavored rum, whatever. And then you have some folks that know a little bit about rum, but the general consensus is that rum is distilled in the Caribbean. And while the origins of what we call rum might be in the Caribbean, rum is actually distilled in over 80 countries. So we're really excited to shed a light on Boston making rum, or Massachusetts making rum, and Scotland making rum.
Mhm.
And so, Constantine, what else? What else?
It's just that really. People's knowledge of rum we've watched in the last 6, 7 years where it's gone from people, what kind of rum do you like? Oh, a dark rum for me, or a gold, or white. That was the categories of rum, say, about 10 years ago. Now people have gotten deeper into it, but I think there's still that bias to thinking, yeah, rum comes from Barbados, Jamaica, then the Spanish rums. And that's kind of, I think the bulk of people on that Venn diagram, that's really what they're thinking of when they think of rum.
Mhm.
But as we've seen on our journeys here, Bryan, you can find rum from almost anywhere it's being made. We've talked about what MOBA's doing down there in South Africa. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, what do you think of South African rum?
The what
Do they
now? What
have
did you
that?
call me?
Exactly, right? Exactly. But we're going to places that you just did. I was in Southeast Asia was my last trip before COVID. Rum distilleries in Cambodia, Vietnam. It's just unbelievable what's happening here. So
Mhm.
we're gonna increase people's knowledge just a little bit, at risk of some people learning something from our silly show. We've got these guys on. A full doctor is here, and Andrew Cabot, who, as you said, has links to the American Revolution. So I want to hear more about this, guys, and just your journeys into rum. I think that the folks are going to find it really interesting to see how you came to produce rum, how you came to produce the style that you're producing. And Kit, I have a special one for you. I was just looking up yesterday on the website, and I saw I think it was an older article that said that you were producing rum through double distillation with a twist. So I'm interested to know what the twist is that I saw in that article because it didn't actually explain what it was. So that's it. But I think we'll get started here.
Any volunteers?
Not good. And the agenda says the doctors first, so I'll be in the waiting room.
Doctor, yeah, if you will.
I should clarify for listeners that I'm not a medical doctor, so please don't ask me for any medical advice. So I'm
Disclaimer,
a doctor
disclaimed.
only. Disclaimer. I think it's you're right. I think this idea that rum is or can only be made in the Caribbean is something which certainly in Scotland, we work hard to dispel that myth. Andrew, I don't know if you have the same attitudes in North America, but certainly in Scotland, I've had quite a few people who tell me that I cannot make rum in Scotland, presumably because we're not a sugarcane growing country. You know, when you mention like Thailand and Cambodia and places like this, I guess you can be like, yeah, sure, that makes sense. You know, they're hot, humid places. You can grow the raw material, but we don't grow sugarcane, can't grow sugarcane in Scotland, not outdoors or commercially. So I think it's even more of a surprise to people when you tell them that you make rum here. It's not associated with a cold northern climate. And most people, it doesn't take much convincing that you can make rum here, but some just won't accept it. They just can't get their head around that it's something that you make in Scotland. But we do have a history of making rum here, which goes back, 300 years or so, back to the dark days of the slavery, slave trading. So we do have that history, but there was a big break, and in that break, that's where Scotch whisky came to the fore, and that's now what people associate with Scotland.
Back in those days, Kit, where you were producing rum and molasses was a commodity 300 years ago, like it is today, that could be shipped anywhere. Was there any real sort of competition between rum producers and whiskey producers back then, or was it what was that
Yes,
like?
yes, there was, because the raw material for making rum was so cheap, because it was derived off the back of slaves. Rum was very popular in like Glasgow, for example, where a lot of sugar came and was shipped into, to the point where the Scotch whisky industry lobbied Parliament to ban the production of rum
Ah,
because it was hurting their sales, and they succeeded. Parliament banned making rum in Scotland. It
no
lasted for
kidding.
2 years, and then yeah, we're allowed to
Enough
make
to
it
kill
again.
it.
But
A
yeah, but
rum
really what killed
prohibition.
it was, yeah, what broke the industry was the abolition of slavery, partly anyway, which obviously made the raw material more expensive or less easy to get hold of, and things shifted much more in Scotch whisky's favor. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's I mean I don't know the full precise history of it, but that's kind of where we were back in the 17th and 18th century in Scotland. But then, yeah, there was long hiatus
Yeah.
until 2016 when dark matter popped up,
Hmm.
making rum from molasses up in Bankery, up in Aberdeenshire, and they sort of. I think there were other brands who were thinking about it at the time. Dark matter just happened to beat them to the punch, and then about a year or two later, some other brands popped up, and then I
Yeah.
came along in 2019. So we're a very young industry still in Scotland, young modern industry in Scotland.
Thinking of raw
No,
materials and how you have to import molasses. I mean, the Scotch whiskey industry, I think most, if not all of the grain is imported to make Scotch. So raw materials are coming from overseas anyway, right?
Yeah, this is a point that I try to make with people when they say that I can't make rum in Scotland because we don't grow sugarcane. And you can say, well, yeah, a lot of the grain that Scotch is made from, like grain whiskey, for example,
Hmm.
yeah, will be imported wheat from Ukraine or something.
Yeah.
So if your criteria is that you have to grow your raw material in the country that you make your spirit, then Scotch would not, you couldn't make Scotch. The
Yeah.
protection for Scotch whisky says nothing about where the raw material must come from, simply what you do with it. So,
hmm.
and Scotch whisky has this amazing reputation, this brand across the world. So yeah, it doesn't really matter for that industry anywhere where their material comes from. But a lot of small indie whiskey distilleries now are very much that grain to glass. They are small estates. They grow their own barley that they harvest and turn into their own whiskey. And to me, that's a really cool thing to do. That's very admirable. But of course,
Mm.
not everyone can do that, and I can't do that with
Yeah.
sugarcane. So I'm very open about that, and
Sure.
we discuss that. It's a good discussion to have with consumers and with industry, and it's all about knowledge and education.
Yeah, and it's very interesting that there was a rum prohibition in Scotland. And Andrew, just kind of shifting over to you, listening to Kit, there's a lot of comparisons between at least historically, rum was really popular, particularly here in the colonies, as you and I have talked about multiple times. But give us the history on the Andrew Cabot overview on history and rum in America, and then how privateer came to be.
Well, it's kind of, and it's a, I don't know what to say this. It's a complementary story. We were a maritime economy, so there was a lot of carrying trade going on, right? We were obviously trying to stay neutral given the wars in Europe and all the rest, and we're getting filthy rich in the process. That was sort of the setup for us. I think what I like about hearing what you described, Kit or Dr. Kit, is in the U.S. I'm just teasing. That was your joke, not mine.
You will call him doctor.
Yeah,
You
you
will
will
call
call me
him
doctor.
Doctor, if you please.
Yeah. No, but in the U.S., it was interesting that the whiskey makers, excuse me, got the support of Congress to get subsidies for growing grains. And grain was a strategic crop for us, as you can imagine, just food supply and all the rest. And rum, the excise taxes or the import taxes kept going up. So how we were squeezed was very different. It wasn't necessarily in competition with whiskey, but whiskey was the beneficiary of subsidies. And anybody who's in this business knows that you spend a lot of time thinking about cost of goods. That's just the reality of it. So I give credit to Fred Minnick for that research. I read that in his book, but it's on my own. I've followed up on his sources, and he's got a very good argument.
And it's insane too that just to expound a little bit more on the history of rum in America for our listeners who may not know, rum was the spirit of choice, far and away. The stuff that was distilled here, I think there were 140 rum distilleries up and down the colonies, and everybody was drinking rum. Was it the quality? Might be in question. Obviously, if they could get their hands on something from Jamaica or Barbados or Antigua, that was preferred. But that's why it led to a lot of the first cocktails in America were rum cocktails, the flip, the bombo, and so on and so forth. And grog had long since been around. We have actually rum to thank George Washington being elected as president, because had he not run a political campaign and donated, I think it's like 30 gallons of rum or something like that. I'd have to go look up the specific records. George Washington would have never been elected to the House of Burgesses. He would have never most likely been voted and elected president. And at the first ever presidential inauguration, there was actually special casks of Barbados rum opened and consumed at George Washington's request, because the average
Insane
American
amounts, as I remember.
Oh, dude, the average American was drinking 4 gallons of rum, 15 and older, 4 gallons of rum. And a lot of that, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be at cask strength. So anything from like 50 all the way up to whatever it was, anything upwards of maybe even like 80%.
And America was just a bunch of drunks for about a century or more there, I think.
You have to bring back the water's not good argument.
Oh no!
Yeah, t-shirt for my gift shop there. No, but I think that simple rules, and again, you make your booze out of what's cheap and plentiful after people are fed. Right? And so we talked about we didn't really spread to the West as a country for a number of reasons. Initially, including we were being told not to. But I think once you do have an extra food supply, you will turn that into your spirit. Doesn't matter if it's rice in Japan or obviously rum and molasses here in the U.S. And the other piece that really fed it, no pun intended, was molasses was a great ballast. I mean, if you think about the carrying trade, again, you're taking timber and cobblestones down to Jamaica, and you walk those streets, and it's certainly not the only island they went to. You got to bring back something heavy and stable. Pineapples will only get you so far. So molasses was a very easy crop to bring back, and early New England rum, which I comment on, even though I've never tasted, was not reputed to be that great. I think it's a generous way to walk around that topic. There was a lot of it, and that was really the application of industrial process. And that's what, you think about it in a weird way, that's kicking off the industrial age a little bit before most historians would land it. But that was the whole motivation. You could make a lot, make it cheap, ship it all over the world, do terrible things with it, and that was that.
Yeah, I can attest to the fact that molasses is great ballast. When I went to pick up my first load of molasses here from the sugar factory, I just took my Subaru up and I said, "Yeah, I'm going to load up all these jerry cans with molasses in the back of the car." I'd never bottomed out my car until I did
smell the tires on the way home,
and then cleaning it out after, because every one of those things I could see in the rearview mirror, because they heat it when they pump it.
Yeah.
Every one of those jerry cans was erupting in the back. It was weeks. Oh, the first day I was like, man, this smells really nice in here.
Yeah.
And then
Once it started fermenting what was left in there, I'm sure it got real
oh,
weird real
I
quick.
had to disassemble like the whole thing. The molasses was as
Oh
deep as
no.
you can go in the car.
Works its way down.
It-
You gotta flip the car over. It's easier.
basically, yeah, and let it hang there and trip
Oh, that's
out.
crazy. Oh man. Well,
Oh.
and given the history of rum in both Scotland and America, I'm curious to kind of take things to where, a little bit more about Privateer and Ninefold. So we talked about when you guys had started, but really, you're not living in places that are well known for rum, right? I mean, Doctor, as we talked about, it's all Scotch, right? It's Brooklotic, which I love Brooklotic, but it's Scotch. And then for Andrew, for you, it's bourbon, it's rye, and that's America's spirit. And there's nothing more manly than drinking a single malt Scotch or a single malt bourbon. So what made both of you say, you know what? I think I'm going to just start a rum distillery of all the things.
I'm laughing because the Scots have had their battles and in history, and we've had the Red Sox for the '70s. So both of us clearly love the underdogs.
Yeah, we are the underdog. I don't know what the bourbon industry is worth in the USA.
It's
Um,
stupid money, stupid money.
yeah, the Scotch whiskey industry. We're a country of I think about 6 million people, and the Scotch whiskey industry is around £4 billion worth of export. I think there's over 200 whiskey distilleries. I think it is an industry that arguably could sustain the country in a way. So what we're doing in terms of rum is so small, and the other big spirit in or well-known spirit in Scotland is gin. Gin
Mm.
has been having its boom for around 15 years now. I think because of that sort of Scottish affinity with spirits and with distilling through the Scotch industry, there's a lot of Scottish gin distillers. So there's a huge industry around that, and that's kind of what enticed me into setting up a distillery. And I probably would have built a gin distillery actually if it weren't for those pesky kids on the other side of the village who decided to build their own gin distillery while I was just
Oh.
kind of having to think about it.
Pesky
And
You would have
actually,
gotten away with it if it wasn't for you
yeah,
meddling
exactly.
kids.
Rip the mask off. Who
Everything
are
goes
you
very
anyway?
smooth.
The mask is still on. The mask is
The
still
mask
on.
is still on, yeah. Meddling kids.
You don't want to see what's underneath it. Um, so yeah, I couldn't really do gin because the guys are literally half a mile away, and Scotch really requires a really big investment. Not just the cash flow of having to age for over 3 years before you can release it, but in order to be able to call it Scotch whiskey, you have to adhere to the GI, the geographical indicator, and that's costly. You have to pay about £6,500 every 2 years to legally be able to call your malted barley spirit Scotch whiskey. So, and you pay that regardless of whether you're Diageo or whether you're me. So it pays, but
Good
you're better
Lord.
doing it at a larger scale. So more in capital investments, to get going, and the cash flow of seeing yourself through until you can actually release something. So for me, rum was enticing because here in Scotland, you don't have to age it. There's no minimum aging for rum, so you can make it and sell it straight away. It's versatile. Plus, it was different. I thought potentially with gin and whiskey having their day in the limelight at the moment, rum might have its day
Mm.
too. It's a small industry. I wanted to be one of the first kind of into it as a new industry in Scotland, and yeah, to see where it went. So that was kind of why rum, and the motivations behind setting up a distillery or to do with diversifying the family estate and all this kind of stuff, to try and build a profitable business.
Hmm.
But that's, yeah, its own story, really.
That's a good topic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ongoing.
Andrew, you made the leap to rum 15 years ago, and just to set the stage for our listeners, I mean, even for myself thinking about 15 years ago in rum, all I think there really was like Zacapa was seen as the premium of premium rums out there. You'd maybe see a bottle of that once in a while, but it was just the classic hits of Sailor Jerry, Captain Morgan. So 15 years ago, when rum was the afterthought of the afterthought, and Harry Potter living under the Dursley stairs, what made you say, you know what?
I
I
gotta
think
come
I'm
up
going to
with
start a rum distillery.
we're only 13. We're in our just
13,
going 30.
excuse me.
I gotta no no I
13 going on 30. Okay, sorry.
it'll
I'm
be
Just getting
15
the
by the
attitude.
time I get it happens. It goes very, very quickly. The first few years are very exciting and slow, and then it really does accelerate. And it's kind of an unusual process. But think about it. When we came up, I was influenced by Eclipse. I was influenced by Havana. I was
Yep.
influenced by Armagnacs. I was influenced by American whiskeys. And so, there was sort of this interesting concept, and we were born with a kind of a whiskey-minded rum. It wasn't for any strategic reasons. It's just probably leaning towards what I like, right? It's sort of dumb, but that's the way I thought about it. It wasn't until about 5 or 6 years ago, and I know he's coming on your show soon, but it was Matt Petrick that sent me this article by Peter Veller. I hope I'm pronouncing his last name right. That really affirmed a lot of the things we learned about New England rum. Here you have this group that's already lost the war to the whiskeys in the South, back to subsidies and these things. And they decided to give it one more push before Prohibition. They bring in, new American oak charred barrels. They're bringing in good molasses. They're distilling it the best they can. They're heating great big warehouses in Boston to 75 degrees to try and create, a climate similar. I mean, there's this magnificent effort, but it didn't have a chance. And for a number of reasons, including what we've talked about already, and I can give you a list of about 5 others. When we learn sort of as we dialed in who we were, which is these last 4 or 5 years, it was recognizing that we believe in an American style rum. We believe in New American oak. It is grounded in history, but I'd be lying if I said we knew that the whole time. And even though we did buy charred barrels out of the front, that was mostly because of a preference. And then, of course, what we've learned is, and Bryan, you've been here for this, it is a delicate art to age rum in New American oak. You could easily over extract. You can easily, and we've even gotten to the point, which I've shared with anybody who'll listen, we have very tight harvesting seasons. We're only taking out a barrel probably 8 weeks of the year. It might be 10.
Why is that?
There's
Nobody's
been able to explain it to me perfectly, but I'll give you a sort of my version of it. There's a sort of a window in the breathing of barrels, and it's affected in part by humidity and temperatures and everything else. And there's sort of this perfect window, as I taste it, between thin and a little bit charred, right? If you allow those to be your fixed points in your thinking, it implies, and I have no idea if this is true, but I will go out on a limb and say it because I think it's better not to know than not know, is that you got the wood as it's expanding is actually pressing out, and you can get too much expansion in the wood, and you can have too little. You can have too much absorption, and those two extremes don't taste right to us. They taste a little bit off and we've mistakenly 8, 9, 10 years ago we would ship a little early. Proof would be different, a little bit thinner on the palate, or a little bit more charred on the palate if it was later, and we just had to learn to dial in that season, which we did over time. And it's interesting because every year we're a little bit optimistic. We think we'll have 2 months, and it's never 2 months. There's about probably, as I said, 4, maybe 6 weeks on a good year that we are at what I would consider maximum time to harvest, best time to harvest. And that's where we have to grab it. And it's a long wake up in the spring, as you would expect, because it's a longer winter than summer. Summer here is 2 months. And it's part of learning how to be a New England distillery. And I need to spend more time with some of the others. We're really the big rum shop in this part of the world, in America and New England. But I think I'm curious to see anybody else in New England or in the northern climes that has the same sort of balancing act that we have to go through. I don't
And
know
you're just basically doing
anything.
samples, and then as you do your sensory analysis with your samples, you say, all right, we're done.
It's ready. And for us, especially with private casts, which we do a lot, it's probably 40% of our business, 30, 40% of our business, depending on the year. But it's a window where you want to get samples out. You want to get choices made. Exactly. Two good examples right there. You want to get them back into operations. And now you're down to about 2 weeks to get everything out. So you don't want to send a sample before it's ready, right?
Yeah.
And you don't want to obviously harvest after it's ready, because that's not good for anybody. So it's a bit of it's a terrible analogy, but it's a little bit of a vendange. Albeit we have a little more time than the wine growers do.
I find that, Andrew, I find it really interesting as I'm still, I would consider a novice distiller. I mean, I'm coming around for 5 years now, making rum without any background knowledge in spirits either. I came at this pretty much cold. And for me, I'm still learning what I can produce in my warehouse. I use almost exclusively American oak as well. I use a lot of fresh American oak, so virgin casks, or now is it first fill or second fill ex bourbon? I refer to them as second fill, because it's my first fill, but the second fill the cask. But they've had bourbon in before, and yeah, it's for me trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. There's no, like yourself, there's no precedent really. It's figuring out for ourselves what works and what doesn't.
I'm only going to say we learned a lot by just getting into a regular routine of sampling. What struck us is how quickly it would change. It wasn't sort of this linear progression. It would kind of jump. And we'd be in a window, and then we'd have a really cold, rainy weekend, come back on Monday, and everything was a little bit out of phase. And then we sort of creep our way back up into phase again. We would harvest again. And again, I'm not going to pretend I have the science. I don't. I've asked an awful lot of smart people, and they give me very good answers, but none of them I can take to ground. That's the way I'd say it. And I think, to be fair to them, how could they? They're telling me what they see from the outside looking in. But it is an interesting phenomenon.
Do you mind me asking a slightly geeky question? And so I just realised that my cat
you have a panther right behind you. I don't want to bum you out, but
Slurry cat.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm actually curious. So I went to visit the main rum company in Liverpool. So they're a kind of offshoot of Ian Shear, huge bulk rum buyer in the Netherlands, and they've got a much smaller operation in the UK, dealing with individual casks rather than bulk spirit. And I was talking to the gentleman who looks after it, Ian Hoyles, and their warehouse. These were warehouses that were built to store casks in. So they've got no windows. There's levels underground. They're very much the temperature window that they operate in is pretty consistent. It's pretty small. And he was blown away when I told him, because he was like, oh, there might be a variation of 5 degrees Celsius. With me, I can have. I measured rum the other day that was at freezing point, water freezing point, so 0 degrees. Yeah. And over summertime, it can be up in I'm going to say the mid 20s, so up in the 60, 70 Fahrenheit. There's huge temperature swings, and I'm guessing for you in New England, you've got even wilder temperature swings over the year.
We high 40s in the winter. We do have a kind of I'm going to call it emergency heat that will kick in if we start getting too low. I've never had a barrel or a group of barrels start to leak because of temperature, but I do worry about it. And let's just say, again, something for us to learn, but let's not do it the hard way. But equally, I'd say I've been in there and it's been pretty much 100 degrees. Again, I'm doing everything in Fahrenheit here, but and I'm not talking about the barrels, I'm talking about the rum. And I know that I go up every level of barrel. It's about a 2-degree jump per level. So I'm at ground level, essentially the second barrel is the best way to say it. And I'm seeing nearly 100 degrees. So that's we said it was 5-degree swing. So I'm doing a 10x of that in the barrel room.
Yeah, easily. Yeah.
But we like that. Again, more to learn. And again, I'm very comfortable with not knowing things until somebody really gives me the right answer. But we think about our summer, our warm season, for lack of a better way to say it. And we only have about 2 months. So when you think about evaporation as on the effect of development, flavor development, we have less of a window to work with. And it's an unusual, we probably are more comfortable letting the environment do what it does, given how short that window is. So we are, you can sort of see why the New Englanders that came before us thought, let's let the wood do some of the lifting, because we don't get the heat here to make this happen. And the steam heating thing isn't and this was steam not for humidity, but for temperature only. But that's not the cheapest way back to cost of goods to run your business. And we've been very lucky with, just letting nature do its thing.
So both of you, Massachusetts, I've been up there. There's some beautiful parts of Massachusetts. Scotland, I've never been, but I've seen it on TV.
It's rubbish. Don't come.
There was a
A lot of the footage of Scotland is actually taken in Massachusetts, the beautiful part. Close to Route 1 on the way up north. Yeah, that's.
I was going to say I've seen Scotland in movies, but you could take that two ways. It could either be the beautiful countryside scenes in Braveheart, or it could be Train Spotting. So one or the other.
Well,
what is it in Train Spotting? We're wankers. We're colonized by wankers. It's a great movie. Both movies. Sorry.
Do either of you have a tourism aspect to your businesses? Distillery tours, visits, things like that?
I do, yeah, very, very small. The Ninefold distillery, there's only really two of us in the business. There's myself, who does basically everything, and there's Adam, who does exclusively my sales side of things, and he works remotely from the distillery. So I run tours myself as the owner at the distillery. It's not something that I really lean on too heavily, because it would be a big suck of my time if I did so. Well, I guess like at that point I could employ someone to. But I have such a small building, I get people asking, so do you have a shop on site? And I'm like, I've got this shelf above my desk. That's where the rums live.
How big, since we can't do visual here, how big is your facility there?
Good question.
I love the hospitality.
I'll have to mentally convert this. So in meters, it's about 5 meters by 15 meters. So you're looking at something like 5 yards by 15 yards, or 15 feet by 45 feet, whatever. Is the still house, and then the warehouse is another 50% bigger or something than that. So yeah, it's pretty small, and the still house is a single room. So as soon as you're through the door, and you cast your eye around, that's it really. But I can milk out an hour and a half tour.
I was going to say, so excuse me, doctor. I keep wanting to say doctor. So with these tours, you just walk in and say, hello, welcome. Here's my shelf. Do you want to try some rum? Here's the office. Here's the barrel room. This is the end of your tour. The Oompa Loompas will see you on the way out,
Yeah, I mean, pretty much.
That's really cool. And doctor, you're doing pot still distillation, right? It's just pot stills?
It's a pot column hybrid. Constantine, you mentioned about double distillation with a twist. Yeah, it is a pot distillation, because it's not a continuous column, but I have a little 4-plate rectifying column that's part of the still that I can bypass if I want to, or I can use it as well. So, but it's tiny. I mean, it's 500 liters, which is, I don't know what it is, 100 and something gallons, 125 gallons, something like that. It's pretty small. And there's only one as well. That's my main limitation, is I have to do everything on this one little pot. So.
Well, I can tell you with having been to privateer, Andrew has always said, if you can get a barrel out of the warehouse, you can take it home for free.
Yes.
I'm kidding.
It's part of our hospitality.
It's
booking the tickets.
But you have to. But you know what you have to do? You have to run on the barrel, like log running. But you have to run on the barrel out of the distillery, and then you can get it out. No, I'm teasing.
You have to look 3 more too while you're doing it. Yeah. No, it's funny. Like, when we had the same problem when we were stripping in our first still. It slows you down. And once we moved to a separate, I know. Forgive me, but marketers have destroyed all the pragmatic words in this industry in my mind, so I'm just going to call it a stripping still. But once we switched to that, 2 things happened. One was, obviously, our throughput went way up, because we're only obviously running the low wines through the stills. But 2, as I look at this thing, I mean, as a musical instrument, our Vendome stripping still looks like a tuba, right? It's the most inefficient thing. I don't mean in terms of energy, but in terms of separation. in the world. Everything comes through, which is what you want, and then you finish it in the still that you're describing. It's a game changer when you move to that, because you'll get an improvement in quality and you'll get a significant improvement in volume for a reasonable investment. But there was no way we could justify it until we had enough of a business to warrant making 12, 15 barrels a week.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, sort of, or I have been at for the last year and a half, is thinking this is a step that I need to make. It would make my life considerably easier. Because the thing is that my still is a third of the size of my fermenter. So when I'm stripping, I have to do 3 batches through the still before even to get all my low wines before I then do my spirits. So it's like 3 days minimum to produce not even enough spirit to fill the standard barrel. So it's a lot of work. Whereas with a second still dedicated to doing the stripping work, it would allow me to do 5, 6 times what I make, or make the same amount. Sorry.
No, you're good. So we're starting a GoFundMe for Ninefold. Get that stripping still in.
Well, it seems like with craft distilleries, especially, that there's that leap you have to make at some point in your progression, and it seems to be almost one of the hardest challenges is to get that capital investment to get you're selling everything, but you've got to get to make more, right? So, I mean, Andrew, you've been through it already. You mentioned that you got the second still. How were you able to do that? Was it just building your sales up to then get the capital you needed to do it?
I think what I'd say is there comes a time where you realize that you just aren't going to be able to meet market needs. And so it's not even a pleasant choice, because you got to plunk down the money or some percentage of it. And then you got to wait another, at the time, everything was, now everything's sort of a little bit in decline, but then everything was in ascent. And so it was a pretty long wait for the stills, best part of a year. So it's kind of I don't think anybody gets to that moment really comfortably. But at some point you kind of have to bet on what you're doing and the people you obviously are with, and just say we're doing it. We had a very solid white business. And like a lot of startups, you go to the money you can return within the year plus some reasonable return. And so that did help, because that meant we were running the stills pretty well. And therefore, that having, I think we had a big chain at the time that had 126 points of sale, or right around that time, plus a fairly good business just in New England on premise, really made it possible. And then I think, as I said, it's never pleasant, but at the right time, you understand. And we were, as I said, we had a product improvement with it too.
Absolutely. And well, and speaking of that growth, growing to make more and get the stripping stills or the other initiatives. I know we see both Ninefold and Privateer doing a lot of social media endeavors, doing a lot of events and activations and things. So would love to hear from both of you on what the next year, couple years look like from a growth perspective. Where do you guys see yourself going? Where do you want to go?
For me this year, export is really what we want to look at. Partly that's driven by the rum market in the UK is still quite small. A large portion of that is driven by the spiced rum side of things. My heart is in what I would call proper rum, and I know that's debatable what proper rum is, and anything that's basically not had added flavor to it. So unaged, aka white rum, and aged stuff. So that's kind of where my heart is. The UK, about half the market, and that's growing, is spiced rum. So of course I make spiced rum for the market, and I'm happy to do so, and I do my best with that. But there are rum markets away from the UK where the unaged rums have a real strong appreciation, or aged rums as well, and that's something that I want to be able to explore. I've had a couple of attempts at it that haven't really worked, but this year I've already got events lined up to be going places in the EU to look at selling some rum abroad. We don't have to deal with any taxation as well, which is we have a very expensive alcohol tax in the UK. We're like fourth highest in the EU and one of the highest in the world. And there's no there's no sort of what's the word, like grading depending on how big you are.
Oh, so craft
So
distillers don't get a break.
yeah, so as a craft distiller, we get no break.
It's rough.
If I was making beer or cider, hard cider to you guys, then there would be. If you make under a certain amount, you pay much less tax, and the more you make, the more tax you pay. For spirits, it's the same across the board. Everyone pays the same rate, and it is prohibitive. It doesn't allow for reinvestment back in the business. So that's another reason for looking at export, is to have something that's a little more profitable for us. So there's that. There I need to get more cask stock away. As I just said, there's a lot of work in putting away casks for me, but that's something that I need to continue so that in a year or two I can start realizing that cask stock. It is my best product. I think anyway, and so it's really where I need to be going. So yeah, that's kind of what we want to do, and obviously grow sales and do more events and all that kind of good stuff. But last year was such a good year for Ninefold that it's going to be quite hard to top in terms of reputational uplift. So we're just going to keep plugging away and trying to get more cash into the business.
Awesome.
Nice. Yeah, fingers crossed. And if there's anything that we can do, please do let us know, because
Drink more
big
rum.
fans.
That's one thing.
Yeah, drink more Ninefold rum.
Yeah, buy Ninefold rum. Buy Ninefold rum.
Buy it, drink it,
Brian's
drink it.
Big Mike.
I know, right? Well, and Andrew, what about yourself?
It's funny, this year, next year, actually a lot of fun for us. We've worked hard over the last, let's say, 4 years to really dial in who we are, what we are, and get away from chasing the moments of craft or the trends in rum elite and all these things. It's been very helpful. It calms this place down a lot and lets us focus on what we want to do. So what does that mean? That means all of our products will be 4 years plus this year. We've released our first 7 years, and we just have a very clear sense of the future. We're moving our entry level product up to a bottle and bond, which is great. And that helps us kind of land in the American spirit space, perhaps, as well as, obviously we love rum and we respect rum, but it helps the American consumer come to us. I'm not a fan of anybody who says we need to educate the customer. I think that sounds dangerous to me. Forgive me. We've had a few governments that operated that way in my mind. I just don't see it. I do think sharing something and learning from your friends and all that is what we do want. It's not a marketing job to educate. It really is giving the gun to the baby in my mind. So that's what we're liking. Our programs are all rum to lips now in a number of states. If we're talking, the rum's not doing its job. We got to think about what we're making and selling. And we're finding, as a sort of an element of the elite crafts artisanal world, single casts aren't for everybody. They're amazing. I love the power. I love everything about them, but it's not the only way to make rum. And certainly there's an awful lot of consumers that we call the early majority, based on Jeffrey Moore's diagrams, that are really excited to go into the rum space as perhaps an alternative, if not rarely a substitute, I would say, for whiskey people, but an alternative. And we want to meet them where they are, and we want to enjoy the conversation with them, and we want to see them come back as a pragmatic customer and buy the same bottle again and again and again. Always curious about something new, fantastic. But the difference, I think, between what we're thinking about and what a lot of the rum world is, not chasing the next thing perpetually, but actually pursuing and finding the thing that you love and want to stay with. And that's rum's working on that. Particularly, you guys know all the amazing, great brands and all the amazing, great work they're doing. I think a steady business is a very attractive option, and the American market is a very attractive market. That's where we go, and that's what we've been doing.
Speaking of bottles and brands and things like that, two of the most distinct bottles, I think, in the rum world right now, especially, Privateer has this very tall, elegant bottle, and you've got the mark on there, the flag, the ensign. Ninefold with the new etched bottle, which I don't have. I've got the older one, but with the This is a Seraphim, is that right? Just talk us through just a little bit about that for our last thing before we close out here, because I think it's really interesting and I mean, beautiful and really distinctive.
Yeah, the Ninefold brand is based around the Seraphim, which is a six-winged angel. If you believe the medieval theologians, then the six-winged angel sits in the ninth level of the angel hierarchy. It's the level closest to God, and that's where that ninth level is where Ninefold comes from. But the reason we use the seraphim is because it's my family crest. So as a Carruthers, if I was posh enough to have a coat of arms, then at the top of the coat of arms would be this six-winged angel. So that's really why we use that. And yeah, it's on the bottle that you held up, Constantine. It's on the label, and there's some decoration on that paper label. But we moved to a fully custom bottle in 2022, where we took the seraphim design and just extended it around the glass and embossed it in the glass, and
Beautiful.
it's part of that
Beautiful.
design.
I was going to say it looks
Love that.
fantastic.
Yeah, where I think it was money well spent right at the start of the business, because it makes our brand look a lot bigger and a lot more professional than it
Yeah,
is.
right. It
You
really does.
know, when it was just me for 3 years, but it looks like a much slicker operation. It does help, catch people's attention, and with a custom bottle as well, that's undoubtedly helped sales, because when you approach people saying, "Oh, we've got a rum and we've got some spice rums," folk, a lot of people are skeptical and like, yeah, okay. And then you bring the bottle out, and immediately that attitude changes. They
Wow.
see that
Mm-hmm.
you're taking it seriously, that you're heavily invested in the business, and that it's going to look great on a shelf or in a back bar. So yeah, that's one place that we spent our money. It's instead of on a still, yeah, it does
But they
work.
probably cost
It's a
about the
great.
same, right? I mean, just looking at glass recently, it is expensive to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, no kidding. I've just had to reorder bottles,
Yeah.
which well, I had to order last year. I had to order a year in advance to get my bottles. I don't
No,
know
that
what it's
was
like for Andrew, but here in Europe, trying to get bottle stock has been difficult since COVID and Suez Canal and all this kind of stuff. It's been difficult. So that was one of the reasons we moved to a custom bottle. But I'm glad that we did so, because it undoubtedly helps the brand, the business move forward a bit as well. So
Yeah.
it's just expensive to do.
Well,
it's got to be a Trump tricky question at the end here. Extra points. We spin a dial. Where do we go at this point? This is my first time.
Oh no, I just wanted to hear more about your just tell us about your label there and your the privateer. You got the red and white striped.
13 stripes, no stars was the public privateer flag. So as you were talking about ensigns and coat of arms and all those sort of more proprietary things, that was the one that was available to all. Privateering, I think most people know it, was essentially just government sanctioned piracy. And so if our government had an enemy, they would say you can go steal their stuff. It happened off the coast of Scotland. It happened off the coast of Europe. It happened anywhere in the North Sea. Obviously, the Caribbean was a larger economy. A lot of it happened down there. So it wasn't geographic and just off the coast of Boston, like some people imagine. And the ships were prized. The prize was the auction by which a privateer would sell the goods that they took. And they could do that in France, and they can do it in some of the islands and the neutral ports and all the rest. That was the only rule once George Washington decided that, particularly the New England people, which were about half the privateers, were such litigious scallywags that he wanted nothing to do with it. He had a very short window of saying, I want to be involved in this process. And that he realized.
Well, if you're a privateer out there and you are robbing ships and selling the goods and getting money, use that money to buy more privateer and more Ninefold.
And that's exactly what it was. Well, okay, yes. And they would buy more privateers to steal more stuff. But when it was time to auction off the stuff that the privateers took, say it, but George Washington had to stand in line with everybody else and pay top dollar.
Get the cut.
I mean, so They got a
Oh.
toe in patriotism and they got a toe in piracy, and you'll have to decide what the weight ratio is.
Wow.
No, it's
Oh
good. It's
man.
a good history, and and again, I like the 13 stripes. Again, it's our 13th year, and we'll probably do something in marketing with it. But
Oh, that's cool.
I like
And
that story
any
of being the general flag.
any bottle of Privateer, Andrew, I know the answer to this, but our listeners may not. Any bottle of Privateer, you'll see a slogan, True American Rum.
True American was one of the 30 plus ships that Andrew Cabot owned with his brothers. Andrew was the primary involved in privateering. He nudged the family into this dark trade, and they made a ton of money from it. I mean, they were millionaires in the 18th century, to give you a sense. But this is the bill of sale
Oh,
of the
wow.
True American right there.
It's amazing.
I liked it for branding purposes. We were making an American rum. We're making an American rum in America. We think it's different. But I just really liked that. And it's been on most of our bottlings and will be on all bottlings going forward. Uh, love our country. So that's where I go. It's not always perfect. It's folded to fit into a pocket, which is classic Yankee, but they use both sides of the paper too.
Oh wow.
Right?
Oh,
So this is Yankee ethic at its best. You know, and the Scots are actually better than we are, but we had to learn from somebody about just being really efficient and not wasting things. And you know, that's the only way you get in this business. That's the only way you profit.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we've learned, to really focus on delivering as much in the bottle as we possibly can, and then you know, finding good people to tell the story.
Awesome.
Just don't bring your boat over here, Andrew, and try and steal my rum, please.
What's the address?
Yeah, I know, right? Andrew's going to be the one swinging from one ship to the next, you know?
I saw your garden
Having the
on the
pistol.
masthead
Yeah.
too. I'm not sure I want to take that thing on.
Awesome.
Oh,
This has been great
excellent,
talking to you
guys.
guys.
The last question for both of you is, you know, for our guests, our listeners, where can people go to find out more?
Doctor.
Doctor.
For me, you can look up Ninefold Distillery. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, with a mailing list you can sign up to. In terms of how you purchase from me, I don't ship outside of the UK. So if most of our listeners are in North America, etc., then places like the Whiskey Exchange and Royal Mile Whiskies and potentially Master of Malt will all ship to the USA, and with presumably some guarantee that they can actually get it through customs. So you'll pay the premium for it, but you can get a hold of it. If you're in the UK, yeah, you can buy direct from me, the above mentioned websites, and depending where you are in the UK, there might be some shops that actually stock it. It is available if you look hard enough and you're prepared to pay for it.
Sure.
Best way to reach us is, you know, Andrew at our domain, privateerrum.com. Obviously, we have a phone number too. And again, we sell in a number of states. We very much focus on our top states. I think you have to really deliver something magnificent to charge more than about $125, $150 a bottle. And I find some of the distribution options get you above that mark way too fast, and not as much goes to the distillery. So that means that we really go deep in our states. We have very good distribution partners in states like Massachusetts, Tennessee, and so forth, California. As you guys know, the secondary market is very active, a little less so than perhaps a year ago, but it's very active, and there's movement there. And I find, even though I shouldn't say this out loud, an awful lot of stores seem to have a tape gun somewhere in the premises, and rum seems to find its way around.
Excellent. Well, thank you both. Thank you to all of our wonderful listeners. Make sure to keep sending in those questions to therum@gmail.com for any subjects, topics that you are looking for. Constantine, who do we have next month on?
Next up, we have, you all know him as the cocktail wonk, Matt Petrick, who's just put out the Modern Caribbean Rum, which is a massive volume.
It's a tome.
Oh, it is a tome with anything and everything you want to know about Caribbean rum.
I read it in 50-page trenches.
Yes, you have to. You have
it's
to. But
fantastic.
It's fantastic, yes.
It really is.
So because of Matt Petrick's deep and impressive knowledge and such a wide-ranging knowledge. We're going to have just one guest. We're a little departure from our usual model of the late night of rum. We'll just have one guest on next, but it's going to be Matt Petrick. So really stay tuned for that, and we look forward to talking with him. And thanks you guys for today. This has been really awesome for us.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Cool.
really a pleasure to meet you. I hope we get you to over to the East Coast sometime, and we'll take good care of you if you get here.
Thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you.